What is good, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only NIO stock and what you should be looking out for the future. I'm also going to break down what's going on with the overall market, what Jerome Powell just said that's affecting the markets, and how this may affect NIO for tomorrow and cause some bearish price action very soon, unfortunately. Now, before I break anything down about why this is, why NIO might see some bearish price action, how the market may dictate it very soon, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I'm not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire NIO community as a whole. And the last things, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed 7 free stocks, and any could be a free NIO share. It's a limited time offer. The offer ends in just 9 days. Check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. So NIO was down 1.94% for the day. Overall, NIO did actually try to push up in the very beginning, hitting 9.52, especially after the news that came out about NIO being very confident about them hitting their sales goals. Now, even though it's awesome to see NIO being very confident and actually improving fundamentally, I want to note something important. Yes, NIO may double its sales for 250,000 vehicles delivered for this year. That's once again very bullish news for the longer term. However, today was not about fundamentals. Today was about the Fed, and the Fed came out and they actually ended up rug pulling the markets. And despite the good news, NIO did get smacked, and we are forming a very, very big topping process right here. And we're likely going to see more downside soon. Very unfortunate. Let me explain exactly why. Start us off, the Fed gave us the 25 basis point rate hike. In the beginning, the market held up. The market did start to sell off just a little bit by the time Jerome Powell came on. He came on 30 minutes later, he started talking. And a couple of the things he said were technically, like, the market liked it. The large majority of what he said was hawkish, though. And he caused the market to tank. And this dragged down Tesla and NIO and the entire market essentially. And because of that, NIO did end up closing in the red. I want to break down something else that's very important. What did Powell say specifically? I don't want to go over every single detail, but I want to break down just a couple of things. Powell said that financial conditions have tightened more than the market shows. So he's saying that right now the market is not like pricing in everything essentially, but at the same time, we are starting to see some tightening. However, he also said that there is a pathway to a soft landing. He actually was asked about this near the very end, and he said that it's possible, or I'm sorry, that there's a pathway, but he's not very confident like before. Before he was saying it was very likely. Don't worry about it. Now he's not saying that. He said it's going to depend more on the data. He isn't as sure, but he said that there is still technically a pathway to getting there, meaning that he's just not as confident anymore about that. He's saying it's too early to come to that conclusion. He also mentioned the fact that right over here, he did criticize many of the regulators that were not necessarily doing the best work to regulate many of the banks. I do agree with him on there, but he did also trivialize the banking situation, saying that the banks are stabilizing, we don't have to worry, this and that. So he did actually come out saying that. Once again, I don't fully agree with him on there, but that's one of the few things I strongly disagreed with him on. He also started talking about inflation. He said that if the Fed needs to raise rates higher, they will. He said that inflation is way too hot, the Fed has a lot of work to do, and they're going to prioritize bringing inflation down. He didn't say anything about a pause. The Fed is telling us they may pause, they may do one more rate hike and then pause by the time we get to like June. Then another thing that's important is the market was betting, excuse me, sorry guys, on the Fed cutting rates this year. And unfortunately, Jerome Powell said they're not planning on doing it this year. They're not going to cut this year. They're not going to pivot this year in terms of like a pivot defined as like cutting rates. We're not seeing it this year. It's going to happen next year, according to Jerome Powell. He also mentioned the fact that we shouldn't be once again predicting rate cuts this year. He did actually criticize the way that Silicon Valley Bank was managed, and there were other things that he said. He mentioned the fact that the Fed may not have to tighten as much to bring things down from this point on, because it's not because things are getting better, it's because things are going to start tightening on their own when the real effects of the rate hikes start coming. And that's why the Fed is willing to pause and just kind of like watch over everything and give assessments every so often about how things are doing. But what he's trying to tell us is there's going to be stress in the credit markets, there's going to be tightening from the credit side, tightening from the housing side, and tightening all over the country. He also mentioned that right now unemployment is still relatively strong, and we're most likely going to see it continue to increase from this point on. And there's still a lot of work to get done to bring inflation down. He mentioned that inflation is too far from their target. They have to keep raising rates, they have to keep tightening. They're going to raise rates a little bit more, but they don't have to do it as much as before. But they are going to continue to tighten on policy. He did mention that they did increase their balance sheet just temporarily to help out banks. But once again, it's a temporary thing. There's no guarantee they're going to keep on doing this. And on top of that, he did say a couple of things about how bank deposits have stabilized, but for the most part, more than 70% of what he said was hawkish, not good for the markets. And he just gave a lot of the bulls betting on the Fed pivot to start now. He gave them a very, very rude awakening. Now, after all the decisions came out, I just want to remind everyone that we have GDP data coming out next week alongside PCE. Then we're going to be starting April, and by the second or third week of April, we have earnings season starting. And the first ones to report earnings are going to be the banks. Once again, not very good news for us. As far as NIO goes, NIO was outperforming the market. Now it's starting to slow down a bit. I do believe we're going to see this price pairs ratio flatten a bit. Besides that, there's not much else going on. NIO does historically tend to be green only 51% of the time on Thursdays. I'm not too confident about a green day tomorrow, though. And also, the short interest on NIO for the past few days went from we saw about 2.6 million shares shorted on a Thursday. By Friday of last week was 5 million. By Monday, 7 million. 7 million NIO shares shorted. We're starting to see more and more of the shorts pile in. They're trying to bring NIO down. Everyone needs to be ready for this. NIO dropped on relatively low volume because shorting played a big role, and also the end of the day selling pressure that was actually pretty extreme. The short volume, in my opinion, is getting ready for a nice bounce. We tend to see it actually bounce around these levels. When this thing bounces, not going to be the best of things for NIO. Now, what's happening to the stock market? I forgot one last thing. For Thursday, we have initial jobless claims coming out. We want this number to be a little bit hot. We want there to be lots of jobless claims. This is coming out 1 hour before the market opens. So what I'm thinking is if jobless claims are pretty decent, the market might actually gap up and kind of bounce a little bit, but I'm not counting on it being too big because overall, it looks to me like the market has a lot more downside, and we're likely going to fill the gap either intraday or maybe going into tomorrow. And we're likely going to see SPY sell all the way down to 390 very soon, or even lower than that by Friday, maybe by early next week, or even lower. Amazon, once again, looking a lot more in favor of the bears. Might try to bounce tomorrow on some good news on the jobs data, but besides that, I do see more selling happening intraday as the day goes on tomorrow, followed by even more selling later on. Same thing for Tesla. Tesla looks like it was in the topping process. Looks like it's going to start to fill a lot of these gaps. Big gap to 183, another big gap in the 170s. The market's looking more bearish. Nvidia actually ended up closing green, kind of surprising. It went all the way up to 275. That's crazy. But then we saw it get a big rejection. It's going to likely continue to come all the way back down to 260, unfortunately. And finally, for NIO, what am I essentially seeing? Unfortunately, we have a head and shoulders forming right here. This is like the head, this is the left shoulder, and then this could be the right shoulder. This is basically telling me that NIO was in the topping process. The Fed is going to cause the market to pull back, and we're likely going to see NIO. By tomorrow, I think NIO is going to retest $9. It's going to try to bounce and hold $9, but if it fails, if it doesn't hold 9, we're likely going to fill this gap, come all the way down to the 8.74 area. And that's obviously not going to hold us too well compared to some other levels. We do have support there, but it's not extremely strong compared to like $8 or something like that. NIO is likely going to start tanking after that, unfortunately, and start to visit the 8.33 zone again and go even lower than that, unfortunately. I know it's unfortunate, but this is what the charts are telling us. We might gap up tomorrow off some good jobs numbers, but overall, the odds are now starting to favor a sell off that's coming and NIO coming down to fill this gap and get closer to the mid eights over the next couple of days. Tomorrow, I think we could even fill the gap. It's a possibility. I'm just going to wait and see. But I just want to note to everyone there most likely will be downside for the markets and downside for NIO coming soon. We might see a small bounce tomorrow into open. Don't forget that. But I'm not counting on it being way too massive. I think the market's just going to slowly uh, favor bears. And it's going to get more and more extreme if more data that comes out for next week and also the earnings starting like within the next couple of weeks end up favoring the bears. Once again, more downside is yet to come. I think NIO might fill this gap tomorrow if we break below 9. So make sure you watch $9. That would take NIO to the like maybe mid 8s to about 8.7, somewhere around there. It's going to drag NIO down, unfortunately. With that said, thank you all so much for listening. Our RSI and MACD are supporting that on both the hourly and on the daily. You could see MACD was in a topping process right here. RSI starting to decline. And if this does continue to come down, the MACD is going to flip. NIO is going to most likely turn more bearish, unfortunately. Thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of the day. Get ready, remain calm, cool, and collected. And I'll see you guys in the next one. NIO to the moon because the long-term future is still incredibly bright. And peace out.